What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you were into the fight talk. We have Leigh Wood, 25 wins and 2 losses, defending his WBA regular featherweight title against Michael Conlan. 16 wins and 0 losses. Now, when I said regular as the version of the WBA belt that Leigh Wood holds, that's because Leo Santa Cruz is somehow inexplicably still the WBA Super Champion at at featherweight 126. So Leigh Wood holds the regular title that he just won last year off of Zhu Can in a pretty surprising 12th round stoppage, in a fight that I kind of see as being, Leigh Wood fighting the fight of his life. I had never seen Leigh Wood look that damn good. And Zhu Can also looked pretty flat. But that's a bit of the backdrop on this Leigh Wood versus Michael Conlan fight. And if you want to know at this moment where these two featherweights stack up, Ring Magazine, they're a fairly good measure in terms of the giving a snapshot, top 10 ranking per division. Right now they have Leigh Wood as the number 7 fighter in the division, right behind Gary Russell Jr. Even though Russell just lost his title to Mark Magsayo, he's still ranked 1 spot over Leigh Wood, who's, again, currently holding that WBA regular belt. The best in the division right now is probably Emanuel Navarrete. He's just a super volume, long arms for the division. I really wanted to see him versus Gary Russell Jr. because, like, talent and ability wise, I look at that as being the best and, the 2 best in the division. But Gary Russell Jr., as I mentioned, just lost his long-held WBC title to Mark Magsayo. But in this Leigh Wood versus Michael Conlan fight, even though Leigh Wood is the belt holder, Michael Conlan is the bigger name in this fight. He's a 2-time Olympian. The first time he participated was in the 2012 Olympics in London. He ended up winning the bronze at, I believe, the flyweight weight class. And then in 2016, he came back and he participated in the Rio Games, and he controversially lost to Russia's Vladimir Nikitin. And Michael Conlan took the loss so badly that he basically, remember when Paulie Malignaggi, you might not, got robbed in a fight against Juan Diaz, the baby bull, and Malignaggi grabbed the mic and just let the judges have it in the post-fight interview in the ring, just killing the sport of boxing and its corruption. Well, Michael Conlan basically gave, middle fingers to the judges and just aired out amateur boxing and its corruption after losing that decision, to Vladimir Nikitin. So Michael Conlan is pretty outspoken. And so then he turns pro after that, and he's still undefeated at this point, moving up the rankings slowly. Kind of, he's being moved on, I think, at a pretty healthy pace, where now he's just starting to fight, the better fighters, because, the first, big chunk of his career, and by the way, he's like 30 years old, so he's not a spring chicken. Being that he participated in the Olympics twice, it's not like he's coming out at like 23, 24 years old, like Shakur Stevenson came out like at, 20, 21 years old by the time he turned pro. Well, Michael Conlan is 30 years old right now. So he was fighting pretty much, regional talents for his first dozen or so fights. And then he actually fought the same Vladimir Nikitin that got the decision over him in the 2016 Rio Games, denying Michael Conlan further participation in that 2016 Olympics. And Michael Conlan avenged that defeat by beating Nikitin via unanimous decision. And Conlan has had 3 fights since, his the third of which is what won him the vacant WBA interim featherweight title. If I couldn't make it any more confusing for you, interim belt, regular belt, super belt. Well, Michael Conlan winning this WBA interim belt is what's giving him the opportunity to fight Leigh Wood for his WBA regular title. And Leigh Wood is He's a pretty good fighter. He's had 1 loss to Gavin McDonald back in 2014, and that was like a 6-round TKO. He won his next 11 fights after that, basically gradually moving up in competition, going for regional, where he's just fighting in like Nottingham, Sheffield, basically all over England. And then he starts winning a couple, regional belts, like when he fought David Joyce. He won the WBO European featherweight title, and then he fights Jaza Dickens in this tournament that they were holding in the UK called the Golden Contract. This was basically the semifinal of that. Leigh Wood fights Jaza Dickens, a crafty veteran. He turns up the aggression. He stays pretty low. He's not a tall fighter. Jaza Dickens wasn't, but he can take the fight to you. Pretty scrappy. He just got schooled in August of 2021 against Kid Galahad, who then got knocked out by Kiko Martinez for a shot at the vacant IBF belt. But Jaza Dickens fights Leigh Wood in February 2020. So this is just before the COVID pandemic. And Jaza Dickens stays low and he's jumping into the pocket on Leigh Wood. Leigh Wood is, counterpunching. And, they list Leigh Wood as orthodox, but I've seen him switch stances. Michael Conlan is a switch hitter. He does orthodox and he fights a lot of his fights primarily in southpaw. Leigh Wood, again, orthodox fighter, but against Jaza Dickens, he moved to southpaw because Jaza Dickens is a southpaw. So they were trying to match basically left hands and try to win the jab battle against one another. But Jaza Dickens he seemed to have the quicker feet. He was able to look like the aggressor, jumping in on Leigh Wood, winning most of the early rounds. Leigh Wood kind of mounted a comeback. Jaza Dickens hurt Leigh Wood badly in the 9th round, where Leigh Wood was holding on to survive the round. He was up against the ropes, getting his head flown back. The commentators were saying the referee's looking in to possibly stop this, and Leigh Wood made it out of the 9th round, actually hurt Jaza Dickens in the 10th round. But Jaza Dickens, he won a majority decision in this fight over Leigh Wood, but that should have been a unanimous decision. He should have won something like 7 rounds to 3, at least, I believe, over Leigh Wood. 7-3 or at least 6-4. I didn't see a draw, and one of the judges had this one a draw, but the other two rightfully gave it to Jaza Dickens. And since then, Leigh Wood has had 2 more fights, one against Reese Mould, where he won by TKO in the 9th, and then he fought for that WBA regular featherweight title against Zhu Can, who I had never seen flatter than he was in this fight. So Zhu Can basically hadn't fought in almost 2 years. And this is during, Eddie Hearn's fight camp during the pandemic, but it was the 2021 version of the fight camp. So, tiny crowds, barely any crowds in this thing. And Leigh Wood is just hitting Zhu Can, who, unlike Michael Conlan, who's going to be coming in low. Michael Conlan is, a taller fighter like Zhu Can. Zhu Can is 5'9", tall for a featherweight. Michael Conlan is, I believe, 5'9". Or, no, he's 5'8", which is still pretty tall for featherweight. Gary Russell Jr., for instance, is about like 5'5". But Leigh Wood is 5'7". So Michael Conlan is a taller fighter. Zhu Can was even taller than that, 5'9". But Zhu Can was coming in with a high guard where you look like you're blinding your own defense and offense because you just have your hands up like this the whole time. And unlike Conlan, who's going to be dipping, even being taller by an inch than Leigh Wood, I expect Conlan to have like the wide stance, kind of crouched low, and controlling the terms of the exchange where, you're jumping in with a jab, and throwing a combination to the body, but getting out of harm's way, not letting the opponent dictate when you exchange. Zhu Can wasn't doing any of that. He was flat-footed, just one step at a time, high guard, allowing Leigh Wood to basically paw with his probing, jab hand, and then selecting when to rip him with the uppercut. Because when you have a high guard, Zhu Can couldn't even see the uppercut coming, so he was getting rifled with the uppercut. Leigh Wood was throwing punches around Zhu Can's high guard, so he was hitting him in the ear, hitting him with both hands, throwing hooks with the lead hand and with the backhand, and then throwing the uppercuts and throwing to the body. Whereas Zhu Can just keeps on coming in with one step at a time, and then trying to rip to the body with combinations, throwing a right hand over the top, jabbing every now and then. Leigh Wood, by the way, was also jabbing like crazy to the body because, again, when Zhu Can is just having his hands up like this, you can afford to jab to the body. You just have to be careful and watch out for the overhand right countering your jab. So Leigh Wood is jabbing to the body, and then he'll split the guard with like his jab too. So even if Zhu Can's hands are up like this, it's not stopping him from getting hit with, again, hooks to both sides from both hands, uppercuts that were just splashing on him to where it's like, hey, you want to do something about that? Like, he was hitting him with several uppercuts that were just impossible to ignore. And with those straight right hands and jabs, they were still splitting the high guard. So it's like, what's the point? Again, Zhu Can looked terrible in this fight. Ended up getting stopped in the 12th round by Leigh Wood, who again was throwing everything but the kitchen sink. He was hitting him with 3-punch combinations, wide punches, straight punches, uppercuts, hitting him with everything. Eventually stopped him in the 12th round. Now Leigh Wood is about to fight Michael Conlan, and anything that was working for Leigh Wood against an opponent like Zhu Can, you cannot expect that to work against a fighter like Michael Conlan, who just has a more athletic style than Leigh Wood. Leigh Wood, like Zhu Can, stands more so upright. He fights taller because he's kind of like this, and then he's looking to jab and then to throw punches. And again, he's gonna wait for you to sometimes jump into the pocket and try to like counter that. But Michael Conlan just has like more movement in his feet. He's moving around the ring. He's cutting angles, and then he's gonna jab and then kind of like try to turn you and then hit to the body, try to catch you cleanly, get out of harm's way. He's not gonna be just lumbering and there for you to just tee off on him like Zhu Can was. So even though, again, Leigh Wood looked great against Zhu Can in winning that WBA featherweight title, Michael Conlan is a totally different matchup, which really makes this interesting. Again, Michael Conlan is undefeated. He hasn't fought top competition. I'd say the best fighter he's fought is probably TJ Doheny in his very last fight, where he won that interim featherweight title, and he won that one via decision. But Doheny was just kind of sitting back and letting Michael Conlan dictate the terms of the exchange. So Michael Conlan could just like kind of, feint, jab. Feint, move, jab, and then let his hands go. And he knows that TJ Doheny's not going to be pressing the issue and try to rough him up, which you kind of have to do with Michael Conlan. Now, Doheny did find some opportunities to get a right hand in there or to kind of push Conlan back and get him pinned up against the ropes, where you could then throw a couple punches to Michael Conlan's body, because that's you really want to hit Conlan to the body because he's moving all the time. You want to start investing to the body early so you could slow him down in the middle to late rounds. Now, will Leigh Wood be able to slow Conlan's movement down? Is he going to be able to be competitive in the jab battle with Michael Conlan, who again has a more athletic stance and style than Leigh Wood, who's looking to throw some pretty hard punches, sharp, accurate punches too. But Leigh Wood isn't the fastest puncher. Like, you could just look at the Leigh Wood versus Zhu Can fight and then watch any Michael Conlan fight and tell the difference and see that Leigh Wood is going to have to pull some other tools out of his bag in order to hang with Michael Conlan. Not that Michael Conlan is any devastating puncher. He's not. He wins most of his fights. Well, he's won half of his fights via stoppage and half via decision. But when you're this early in your career, even fighters like Floyd Mayweather isn't, he doesn't have a reputation of being a super hard puncher, right? But when he was in that stage of his career, he was still stopping the vast majority of his opponents. Usually, you're getting all your knockouts, most of your knockouts early to your mid-career. And then when you start to fight nothing but elite level or near elite level fighters, that's when you start winning more of your fights via decision, just because your opponents know how to survive. They know how to fight. They are just on a different caliber. So Michael Conlan is really not a power puncher, but again, his ability to kind of control range and space, I think is going to give him the edge over Leigh Wood here. I think Leigh Wood's going to try to find opportunities to, counter Michael Conlan effectively. But the truth is, Leigh Wood's really going to have to, can he walk Michael Conlan down? If Michael Conlan is the better mover and is able to control range, what is Leigh Wood going to do to stop Conlan from only exchanging when Conlan wants to exchange and instead kind of force a fight onto Michael Conlan? Like, Leigh Wood could either sit back and try to sharpshoot and catch Conlan with something really hard as Conlan is jumping in. But again, Conlan is moving his head. He's changing levels. He's doing all these things that Zhu Can was not doing. So I'm looking at this one, and I think Leigh Wood is going to make a lot of the rounds competitive. I think he's going to win a few rounds just because he's a pretty good combination puncher. He hits hard. He's very game. Like, when he gets a sense that he's losing a round, he's going to try to fight his way into winning that round. But I just see Leigh Wood having trouble catching up with Conlan's style. Conlan is going to be on the balls of his feet. Leigh Wood, you know, is kind of like a step and slider, and he'll be waiting for opportunities. I just don't see Leigh Wood being able to impose his will and walk Michael Conlan down without opening himself up to cleaner punches. So I've got Michael Conlan winning this one probably via decision, and I think it's going to be a close-ish decision where I think that Leigh Wood, now again, Leigh Wood got hurt pretty badly towards the end of that Jazza Dickens fight to where I thought that Leigh Wood was about to be stopped. So Conlan stopping Wood is not out of the question, but I do think Leigh Wood is going to find a way to go the distance with Michael Conlan. I just think he's going to be dropping like 8 rounds to 4 or 7 rounds to 5, something like that. 115, 113, 116, 112. That type of a decision win for Michael Conlan, I see as being the most likely scenario. If Leigh Wood did beat Michael Conlan and hand the Irishman his first loss, that coupled with his performance, Leigh Wood's performance against Jukan, is going to catapult Leigh Wood's name. He's going to be a pretty big deal if he could pull this off against Michael Conlan. I just think that it's more likely that Michael Conlan becomes the new regular title holder against Leigh Wood. Again, via either like a split decision, close and competitive, but somewhat clear decision win for Michael Conlan. And I don't know whether this is going to be a snoozer of a fight or an exciting fight. Leigh Wood usually makes for some pretty exciting fights. I've seen Michael Conlan in more snoozers relatively. Like some of his fights are pretty high octane, but sometimes when he feels like he's more or less gained control on the scorecards and is able to stay out of harm's way, he seems more or less content with just winning the rounds and cruising to a decision. I don't think he's going to have the luxury of cruising to a decision versus Leigh Wood, which makes me think that this might be a pretty exciting fight. But yeah, let me know what you think about Leigh Wood versus Michael Conlan for that WBA regular featherweight title. Who would you like to see each of these fighters fight, given the different possible results of this fight? Like if Leigh Wood wins, would you want to see him fight Emanuel Navarrete? Would you want to see him fight Magsayo, Mauricio Lara, the winner of Kiko Martinez versus former IBF champ Josh Warrington? And in the same division, where does Gary Russell Jr. go from here? If he doesn't get that immediate rematch against Magsayo, I'm really curious to see what already largely inactive Gary Russell Jr. is going to do from here. Jukan, again, was pretty inactive leading up to that Leigh Wood fight. I'm still curious to see where he goes from here. Kid Galahad just got knocked out pretty cold by Kiko Martinez. I'm pretty interested to see where he goes from here. It's an exciting division. It's just unfortunate that you rarely get, you know, a lot of unifying title fights where you're really seeing the best of the division fight the best of the division. Like we did get Leo Santa Cruz versus Carl Frampton a couple times. We never got Leo Santa Cruz versus Gary Russell Jr., Gary Russell Jr. versus Josh Warrington, or Gary Russell Jr. versus Emanuel Navarrete. But yeah, let me know what you think about this division and about this Leigh Wood versus Michael Conlan fight in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.